All right, so today we're diving deep into plant plumbing.
Plant plumbing.
Yeah, like their vascular systems, the internal highways for water and food, but way more awesome than it sounds.
You mean the way they transport water and nutrients?
Exactly. But think about it. They do all that without a heart.
It is pretty fascinating how plants manage this intricate transport system without a heart.
No heart. That's wild.
Yeah, unlike us humans who rely on a central pump.
So how does a redwood get water all the way to the top?
That's a great question. It's like defying gravity.
It is.
The secret's in two key players.
Who are they?
Xylem and Phloem.
Xylem.
Yeah, think of it as like a network of tiny interconnected straws.
Straws.
Yeah, specialized cells that form a pipeline
From where to where?
from the roots to the leaves.
So it's a superhighway for water, but built with microscopic straws.
Precisely.
Okay, but how does the water actually move upwards?
Yeah.
Against gravity?
It's driven by something we call transpiration pull,
Transpiration pull.
as water evaporates from the leaves.
Through those tiny pores.
Yeah, the stomata, it creates the suction force that pulls water upwards.
I see. So it's like a chain reaction starting at the leaves.
Exactly.
And what about those straws making up the xylem? What are they like?
Well, this is where it gets a little spooky. They're dead cells.
Dead cells?
Yeah,
No cell content.
so nothing to block the water flow.
You got it. These dead cells, called tracheids and vessel elements, they just form hollow tubes.
That makes sense. It's like a clear path for water transport.
A very efficient one, too.
So we've got water cruising up the xylem highway, but what about the food? That has to be transported too, right?
And it is the phloem.
The phloem, right. The sugar express.
You got it. It delivers those sweet rewards of photosynthesis from the leaves to the rest of the plant.
But unlike xylem, phloem's made of living cells, right?
It is. And the transport process is a bit more complex.
Living cells. So there's some serious action happening inside there.
Absolutely. It's what we call active transport. Active transport. So the plant has to put in some effort for its sugar delivery.
Exactly. It requires energy. Think of it like a busy delivery service.
Constantly moving sugars.
Specifically sucrose to wherever it's needed.
So how does it actually work?
Well, that's a question that still has scientists puzzled. The exact mechanism of phloem transport or translocation is still a bit of a mystery.
A scientific mystery.
I love it.
So we've got the xylem superhighway moving water up and the phloem express delivering sugars. Weight.
Sometimes upwards, sometimes downwards.
That can go both ways.
Unlike the xylem, which is one way for water, the phloem can move sugars in both directions.
A two-way street for sugar. Got it.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking back to like stringy celery. Why does that get stuck in your teeth?
Ah, that's a vascular bundle.
Vascular bundle.
Yeah, it's where xylem and phloem tissues run together, like a combined highway and express lane.
So it's like a super efficient transportation hub.
Right.
It's amazing to think about these intricate networks operating in every plant.
Isn't it? It really highlights nature's ingenuity.
It does. Speaking of ingenuity, maple trees and that delicious syrup is like a perfect example of how this plant plumbing works.
It is.
So maple syrup, my weakness.
Imagine tapping a maple tree in early spring.
Okay, yeah.
During the winter, the tree stores starch in its roots.
Uh-huh.
Come spring, that starch is converted into sucrose,
Sugar.
and then it's transported upwards through the phloem to fuel new growth.
Like buds and leaves.
Exactly.
So the sap we tap is basically like the tree's energy drink, packed with sugar.
You could say that.
That makes maple syrup even sweeter.
And this process is only possible because of how efficiently the phloem transports sugars.
This is so cool. But what happens to the extra sugar once leaves are making their own food?
Once the leaves start photosynthesizing, they become the primary source of food.
Right.
The phloem then switches gears and starts delivering excess sugar from the leaves to other parts of the plant.
Including the roots for storage.
Exactly. It's a very dynamic system
Constantly adapting.
to the plant's needs.
Wow, this is way more complex and fascinating than I ever imagined.
It really is. It is. It really showcases the power of evolution. All this xylem and phloem, it's allowed plants to grow almost everywhere.
You're right, I hadn't thought of it that way. And speaking of adaptations, what about plants in extreme environments, like the desert? How do they handle transporting water when there's so little of it?
Desert plants are a great example of adaptation. They have all sorts of water-saving features.
Like what?
Thick, waxy leaves.
To minimize water loss.
Right, and deep root systems.
To reach those underground water sources.
Exactly. So it's like they've mastered water conservation.
But what about their xylem? Does it have any special features?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In those dry conditions, the tension in the xylem can get so strong.
What happens?
Air bubbles can form.
Yeah,
They block the flow of water.
like a plumbing nightmare.
For a plant, definitely. But desert plants, they've evolved these special
And
structures
they're silent,
to prevent those bubbles from
so
forming,
they can still get water.
even in the most arid environments.
Wow, that's clever. It's like they have built-in safety features. But what about really cold climates? How do they deal with freezing temperatures? Wouldn't that damage their plumbing?
That's another great question. Some plants in cold climates produce antifreeze compounds.
Antifreeze, like in cars,
Similar concept. It lowers the freezing point of the water in their cells.
so they don't freeze
Well, it's more like they have their own internal winterizing system.
to protect their tissues.
Exactly.
Antifreeze in plants. That's wild. What about plants that don't have that? Do they just freeze solid?
Not all of them. Some plants have evolved to go dormant during winter.
Dormant,
Basically, they hit pause on their metabolism until it gets warmer.
like they're waiting out the storm.
Yeah, you could say that.
So they either prevent freezing or just shut down completely. Fascinating. We've been talking about xylem and phloem as separate systems, but they have to work together, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
They might transport different things,
Water, sugar.
but they're interconnected. They rely on each other.
to keep the plant alive.
Exactly. For overall health and survival.
So it's like a symbiotic relationship. But how do they coordinate? Plants don't have brains or nervous systems, so how do they communicate?
Great point. While they don't have a nervous system, plants have their own communication networks.
Really?
They communicate through chemical signals.
Chemical signals.
We call them hormones.
Hormones, like in humans.
Kind of. These hormones travel through the plant's vascular system. They influence growth and development and how the plant responds to its environment.
So if the leaves sense there's not enough water, they can send a signal to the roots.
To take up more water, exactly.
That's pretty amazing. So xylem and phloem are working together to keep the plant hydrated and fed.
Think about the transport of sugars from the leaves down to the roots.
Okay.
The phloem delivers the sugars to the roots for growth and energy storage. And in return,
The roots send water and nutrients up to the leaves through the xylem.
it's a perfectly balanced system, the above ground and below ground parts working together. And all this without a brain. It's
Oh.
incredible.
Yeah.
What about those essential oils and resins I remember learning about? Don't some plants transport those through their xylem too?
You have a good memory. That's another fascinating aspect of plant transport.
So how does that work?
Some plants have specialized xylem tissues just for transporting those substances.
What do they do?
They can play a lot of different roles. Attracting pollinators.
Oh, like bees?
Right. Deterring herbivores.
So they don't get eaten.
And protecting the plant from diseases.
It's like a built-in defense system and communication network. Plant plumbing is involved in so much more than just moving water and nutrients.
It really is. It's vital for the plant's survival, how it interacts with its environment.
And with all the different plants and environments out there.
It's clearly played a key role in their evolution.
Okay, this has all been fascinating. But what about people who aren't botanists? Why should we care about how plants work on the inside?
That's a good question. Understanding plant transport helps us understand how life on Earth is connected. Plants are important,
They are the foundation of most ecosystems. They provide food and oxygen.
even for us humans.
Exactly. So when we see a forest, we're not just seeing pretty trees, we're seeing a complex web of life.
Supported by these amazing vascular systems,
And when we understand how they work, we can better appreciate the role plants play in our own lives.
and how important it is to protect them.
Plus, there's potential for biomimicry. Taking inspiration from nature to solve our own problems.
Plants have come up with some pretty efficient and sustainable ways to transport fluids,
Maybe we can learn from them.
like for buildings.
Buildings, water filtration, even energy production.
So it's not just about knowing stuff about plants, it's about understanding their importance for our own well-being.
And learning from how clever they are.
This deep dive has definitely given me a whole new appreciation for the power of plants.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to discover about plant transport. It's like we shrunk down and went on this microscopic road trip through a plant.
Seeing all the highways and byways.
And how they keep everything running. It's amazing how it all works with such simple forces. Transpiration pull, cohesion, adhesion.
No need for pumps or engines.
Right. Just elegant, efficient design. You were talking about biomimicry earlier, like using nature to solve our own problems.
It's already led to some pretty cool innovations.
I can imagine skyscrapers that work like trees. just drawing water upwards without needing all that energy for pumps.
That's a great
Or
example.
buildings with pipes that can heal themselves like plants.
The possibilities are endless, and it goes way beyond buildings.
Oh yeah.
What if we had water filtration systems that work the way plants filter water from the soil?
Or new materials inspired by how strong and flexible plant tissues are.
Exactly.
It's like plants have a blueprint for sustainable living.
We just have to learn from them.
Well, this deep dive has been eye-opening for sure. But for our listeners, what's the takeaway? Why should we care about this stuff?
Understanding how plants work helps us connect with nature.
Like on a deeper level.
When you see a forest or a field full of wildflowers, you can appreciate what's happening underground.
The water flowing, the nutrients moving.
The communication between different parts of the plant.
It's like a whole hidden world. It makes you realize plants are so much more than we think they are.
They're not just static, they're dynamic, living things.
With complex systems.
As sophisticated as our own in many ways.
And don't forget, plants are the foundation of most ecosystems. They give us food, oxygen, shelter.
For all sorts of creatures, including us.
So our survival depends on them.
It really highlights how interconnected we all are.
Part of this big web of life.
Even the smallest things can have a huge impact.
So next time you eat a piece of fruit or look at a tree,
take a moment to think about the amazing journey that water and nutrients took to get there.
It's a story of resilience, ingenuity,
and how interconnected life is.
Well said. I
Yeah.
think that's a great place to wrap things up.
This has been a fascinating look into the hidden world of plant plumbing.
I hope our listeners have a newfound appreciation for plants.
I hope so too. Maybe it'll even inspire some future botanists or biomimicry experts.
There's still so much out there to learn.
That's what makes science so exciting.
Keep those deep dive minds engaged, everyone.